y'all. I'm doing a conversation on leadership with Josh Levin, if I can find a way of making this happen. Let's see. How does the internet work? Is a question. All right. I knew there was going to be like awkward downtime, but I can add Valerie if Valerie wants to come. But apparently I can't add Josh. Oh, internets. This is very odd. If anyone knows how to work the internet, feel free to, post something. Levin, are you on your phone? I think you might have to be to make this work. In the meantime, let me say some things about leadership. While Levin hopefully finds a way to make this work. We had planned to do a webinar on how to teach leadership for the Emergent Leadership Training that Levin and I are doing at the start of July. And I think Levin's going to get on his phone and hopefully can hop on here with me. And the thought of it is, basically we have an introductory training, the Authentic Leadership Training, but that teaches leadership through like, what's the basic structure? Like how do you set up a games night? How do you enroll a group of people into an activity? How do you make a flow? But like what happens when something happens that you don't expect? When you're in an event or when you're on a Facebook Live and you can't invite the guests that you meant to have, like what do you do then? How do you reveal? How do you here we go. How do you deal with incongruity? Like, do you smile at it, or do you completely collapse, or do you end the Facebook video, which I felt tempted to do a couple times. And that's what I've been curious about is like, I know how to teach leadership through structure. Oh, hey, Josh. Can you hear me?
Hi.
Hi.
Yes, I can hear you.
Wow, it's actually working. Cool.
I've never done a Facebook Live on my phone. I can only see a little picture of myself. Is that what you see, a little picture of yourself?
Yep. I'm just going to upstage you this whole time. So, I can just like kind of block you out whenever I'm not interested in what you're saying. How do I? I can't do it. I was awkwardly trying to give context while really just stalling for time. So we could restart. And since I feel a little bit shy, I'm curious if you can say something about why we're doing this.
Yeah. Well, how about a present moment check-in? We start with that. And I will say that I feel awkward with a vertical oriented video. And I'm aware that it's a little bit of a rough start technically, but mostly I feel excited to see you and see the trees behind you and talk about this thing that we love so much. And I feel curious about what will come, and I feel ready to enjoy it, whatever it is. And I'm not even connected to my Wi-Fi. I wonder if that would be very good and important.
Potentially, although you're pretty clear.
Let me try.
As you're talking, I'm remembering like one of the key differences between us and one of the things that makes it both infuriating and magical to teach with you, which is like our difference in speeds. I'm like, we're doing this video, and here's the context of the video, and you're like, I'm feeling attracted to the trees behind you and aware of my present moment experience. I'm like, oh yeah, present moment experience. I've heard of that.
What happened, Sarah? Do I now look like I'm sideways?
Yes, which is pretty fun.
Okay. So I think we just answered one of the questions. How do we teach leadership? Well, I think we get clear on what our own strengths are and we build a team of complementary skills and energies.
Hmm.
And so we have our superpowered squirrel, otherwise known as you, and we have our slow turtle, otherwise known as me. And we have two other people who are lovely additions to our staff as well. And I think that one aspect of my own leadership and certainly um, teaching others is to identify what are my natural strengths and to own them. I'm really good at certain things, and guess what? I have limitations and I have things that I'm not so good at. And oh my God, Sarah, you're so much better at those than me. How about you do those when it really matters? And when it doesn't matter so much, you'll just train me up on it slowly,
Hmm.
and vice versa. And so having a clear understanding with a sense of humility, but also dignity of what I am and am not good at, and learning how to share the stage and share the teaching and share the offerings with people who are better than me at certain things.
Yeah. Something
So that's my ad hoc role into that.
I love it. Something I've been thinking about on this line um, of leadership and emergent leadership in particular, which I define as leading from the moment, leading not necessarily from what I've planned, but allowing my leadership to be affected by what's arising, what's happening right here and now, what I can't expect, what's present. Um, I've been building community a lot recently, and witnessing community build and kind of um, researching that process, even as I weave in through the day to day of working with individuals and groups that have already formed. And something I found is it's almost impossible to predict a structure in advance that will work. There's always this point where somebody like goes beyond the edge of what's okay. Like, somebody shouts and it like frustrates somebody else, or expresses sexuality in a way that somebody else is upset by, or says something where another person in the group feels left out. There's this kind of like um, at any given moment we're prone to triggering each other because we're holding different internal contexts, different expectations, different desires, different senses of safety. And so like whenever I go over that edge, there's this moment of like, if I'm an individual, my system's kind of flipping out about it and going like, oh, something's wrong, something's wrong. And if I'm in a group, the group starts kind of flipping out, like, okay, something's gone off the rails and we're not safe now and the group's going to disintegrate and I'm not welcome here. And there's this real kind of existential fear. And it's almost like the tension between the fear and the desire for what people want the group to be, or for who I want myself to be, if it's at an individual level, because I think individual and social are kind of holograms of each other. Um, Going over that edge and feeling the tension is what causes the group then to autocorrect. Then we have a discussion about like, okay, wait, what happened there? What are our values? If it's kind of in this authentic relating sphere where the tools that we get are to learn how to notice those moments of tension, and rather than assuming, well, now it's broken, like pause on it and talk about it. And you and I have done that repeatedly throughout our collaboration. I remember the first time that we led the Emergent Leadership together, we finished it and I said, uh-oh, I don't know what the sound
Sorry,
is.
that's probably my,
Okay.
hold on. Keep going, I'll fix that.
Is that your text message alert?
Yes.
That's amazing. This is why I can't work with you. Um, the first time we led the Emergent, is it like a beeper for every time I speak? Um, yeah. So I remember that when you and I worked with each other for the first time, we ended the training and I messaged you and I was like, I never want to work with you again. that was that was awful, and I felt unsupported, and you disappeared on all the breaks to introvert, and you left me like on my own. And we didn't have a leadership team at that point. It was just you and me. We didn't have Hazel, Grace, or Jonathan yet. And you kind of like stopped me, and we got on a call and you slowed down in the way that you do so brilliantly, and you were like, okay, what happened? And like, what did you expect of me? And what did I do? And it was like that process of going over the edge to a point where like I thought that things were broken, and then having a conversation about it that actually allowed us to each bring our strengths more and know what each other needed.
Nice. So there's a part of me, Sarah, that wants to zoom out and give some kind of introduction about what we're doing on this call. And I also don't want to do that yet. I want to respond to what you're saying first. Um, Part of what you're highlighting for me is that in the style of leadership that we're embodying and that we are teaching about in this training, there is room for what emerges unpredictably. And not only is there room for it, but there's a recognition of how much value can get produced for a group when we're willing to be with that experience of going over the edge. When we've made room internally for it to come, and we support the group in making room for it to come. And so that thing happens in the group, and we pause and we address it and we learn from it. And I think the group then gets stronger, right? When we have tensions or conflicts that we then repair, well, we create a bond, we create intimacy stronger than if we never had it in the first place. And then similarly with you and me, if we never get into a conflict or we never have a question of, do I trust you or did something go off? We never get the chance to repair it and then feel that much closer and that much more confident that, wow, if we handled that rough spot, we can handle the next rough spot. And wow, the sense of potential starts going exponential even. So that's some of the flavor for me that lives in the emergent space. It's a vast, welcoming, open space of emergence that says there's no way we can predict exactly what's going to happen. And guess what? Even if we could, we wouldn't want to because it's exciting, it's challenging, we're on the edge, it's creativity. And that's the sweet spot that we're aiming for between the masculine structure and the feminine flow and emergence, and having both, right?
Mm-hmm.
Emergent leadership is not all just chaos, which is what some people think. It's a plan and a structure and an agenda that's held loosely and lightly and can be dropped at any point in service of what is more alive.
Mm-hmm.
So how's that?
Awesome. I love that you highlighted both ends of that, like the need for structure and the need for flow, and how do you move between them. And I think what we had wanted to talk about on this call was actually like, how do you teach that? Because that's really what you and I have explored, of like, how do you use structure to teach something that's about transcending structure?
Yeah.
And we've developed some
And and
formats
for
for that.
those, and for those of you joining us or watching that have no idea maybe about what any of this is, maybe we could do just a couple minute high level intro. Does that sound good?
Down.
Yes. So I'll do my quick version and then you can add to it. And then I have a story that you're going to be sort of taking the lead on the rest of this. So um, we'll throw me in more here at the beginning, maybe. Or maybe I'm totally wrong and I'll talk more than you, but I hope not, because I like hearing you talk more than I like hearing you talk. And that's not very familiar.
Aw, I'll take that as a compliment, I think.
It's a very big compliment. Yeah. So Sarah, you and I have known each other for years, I would say 6 or 7 years at this point, and we have evolved into colleagues over the last few years, and we were excited to put our minds and our hearts together and put our bodies in the same town and offer some new workshop or training. And it only took maybe 15 or 20 minutes, I think, of just putting your attention on it until you said, wow, we could make advanced level of the ALT. And the ALT was the workshop you'd already created and you'd already been running and was a very successful thing, the authentic leadership training. And you hadn't yet developed a level 2 for graduates of that. And that was your new idea. And I said, let's do it. That would be awesome. And so we've led it 3 times so far in Austin. And in July would be the 4th time that we're leading it. And that's what I will. Oh, and it's a 5-day training, and it's powerful. It's predictably, consistently powerful in ways that we recognize, and in new ways every time. People get things out of it that I wouldn't have even thought they would get out of it. So I'm going to toss the ball back to you. That's my little blurb.
Yeah. I'm just like, I'm thinking of the fact that this is coming up. I'm thinking of the people that we have registered so far, and I have to say that like I'm doing like a fair number of events in the next couple weeks, and don't tell the other ones, but I'm probably most excited about this because it's the widest space of play. And what I was thinking about with it recently is like the authentic leadership training, which is 2.5 days, is like a fairly structured offering. Like I've done it. I've led it personally maybe 35 times, and it's licensed now, so it's probably been led, close to 50. And it's like down to a science of like, what do we need to do every moment to teach the basic structure of leadership as well as possible? How do you construct a plan, giving feedback on facilitation? What do you do? And when I started thinking about it recently, I realized that, I can teach structured leadership in a weekend, um, but I can't necessarily teach responsive leadership as well, because the skills of responding to a situation when we're under stress, we kind of default to our normal, like our lowest common denominator. So if I'm under stress, I am a fairly controlling person, and I default to taking control. So oftentimes in workshops, like when things have started going wonky and there's like a lot happening, I will start doing everybody else's job. And it's like, how
And you might be better than them at their job.
that's possible. But like, then, that happened at an Emergent Leadership Training. And, I started helping out in the kitchen, and it was Hazel Grace's job. Or I think I was checking with the chef about something, and it was Hazel Grace's job. And, I turned around and she's standing there, and she gives me this look, and she's like, do you not trust me to do that? Like, what has you taking it over right now? And I felt a lot of shame in that moment. Like she wasn't saying it in a shaming way, but I realized that I had let my default habits override what I knew as a good leader, which is like, even if someone's going to do something slightly differently than you are, or even what you perceive as slightly worse, the amount of energy that gets freed up to do other things when you're just focusing on the ones actually that are in your role is massive. So like having the ELT for me, and like having it as a 4.5 day training, is an opportunity to get into the individual psychology and blocks and superpowers of every participant coming, and really workshop like, where are you like when you're at your best, and also when you're under stress, and how do we workshop from that place and have you lead. Like I'm remembering a pod at the last one where we were running what we call block ops, which is where we get a participant into the situation in which they would be most triggered in leadership. We basically recreate it, have that situation occur, have them try to lead within it, and then when it's overwhelming, pause and kind of coach and work with it, and maybe have other people demo it. And this one, the thing the participant was scared of was being very angry while in leadership. And so half the pod was basically us figuring out what would most trigger him and just doing that. And so I got to play with my own edge of like being an asshole, like, and really like getting into like, what is the thing that he would need to work and learn, and what happens when he shows up in that space. And then you did this beautiful teaching on trigger that helped inform him in actually having a different option around the anger, and even seeing it as a superpower in some ways. And he'll be coming
Yeah.
back actually at the next one. He's been at the last two, I believe.
So your movement when you feel stressed or threatened, your movement is to grab control.
Mm-hmm.
And that's your default go-to. And I think one of the things that I'm getting from what you're saying is that part of how we teach leadership is to help people with their level of self-awareness. Well, again, like I said at the beginning, what are you already good at? What are your edges? And what are the things that most stress you out? And so I think a big part of leadership is knowing if I'm triggered, if I'm stressed out, and knowing how to bring myself out of that triggered place. Knowing how, if I have to lead from a triggered place because I'm in a moment where I don't have the time or the opportunity to really bring my attention back into myself and pause the whole thing. So sometimes we do have to lead from a place of overwhelm or trigger. And then also, though, more often than we think, if we catch it, we have the opportunity to come back into more of the fullness of my own intelligence as I come back from the trigger.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think another hallmark of emergent is that I don't have it that I should not get triggered necessarily. My welcoming of the space and the experience includes everybody's trigger and includes my trigger.
Mm-hmm.
And I trust it's another valuable piece of curriculum that can arise. So I guess a main piece of how we train leaders in an emergent style is to help them expand more and more about what they're willing to welcome in themselves and other people,
Yeah. I had.
and and start to dissolve the old conventional ideas of what leadership looks like. I'm the expert. I know everything, and I'm not vulnerable, and I don't get triggered, and I don't have moments where I don't know. And we're really working over and over with rooting out the last vestiges of that old programming of what I don't know, this old model of patriarchal leadership. I'm not sure where exactly it came from, but it's not it's not serving people in the powerful way that we've seen relational emergent leadership serve people.
Yeah. And even in, um, I'm loving some of the comments here. Thanks, David. Um, Even after having been exposed to a format of authentic leadership for so long, I still am learning every time I'm in the emergent leadership training these little moments that like I'm stuck around. Like I remember at the last training, like I show up late for almost everything. Um, if it's an online thing, it's usually like 2 to 5 minutes. If it's a live thing, it's usually like 10 to 15. Like I actually know the amount of time I'm likely to be late. But I don't necessarily have control over it. And so the normal pattern for me when I'm late to things has always been I'm late, the people in the meeting get annoyed, I feel shame, then I show up late the next time. And, it's something where even though I'm doing authentic leadership, it's like an obvious, like, don't show up late. Like, that's just a thing in culture that you don't do. It's disrespectful to show up late. And yet, in the same way as like if I have a soft voice, I can't help but speak softly, and I really have to train myself and find a way of training myself to speak louder. Lateness is like that for me. And on the last ELT, we had this team meeting after the training where you challenged our co-leads, Hazel Grace and Jonathan, to kind of see it as like a thing that I basically to get curious about it and understand like how their curiosity could be in service of the training as a whole. And it gave me a whole different frame on how to see um, these parts of myself that as a leader I don't accept. And it really also made me aware of how much energy is lost in me being frustrated and ashamed at something that like I don't yet have a strategy to control, rather than having a space to work on what would I do? How would others support me? If I'm really considering the truth, what some friends at the Center for Applied Rationality called Murphy Jitsu, like jujitsu on Murphy's Law, like if you imagine into the future, do I actually imagine myself showing up on time? And if not, what else do I need to do? Um, that was a real breakthrough for me. So it's like, I think the emergent leadership training is about how do you lead from what's emerging in the moment, but it's also how do you lead from what's true in you and emerging in you.
Yes. Yes. I like this rhythm, Sarah, where we're bouncing off each other. You're reminding me of things. I like zooming into, specific stories and zoom back out to the overview of what the training is about. For me, what you're highlighting now is when I'm training leaders, I think the two most important things for me are self-awareness and self-acceptance. If I don't accept something about myself, it's going to be really hard for me to work with other people who are experiencing something similar. It's also going to be really hard for me to maintain my seat and full access to all of my intelligence, my body, my heart, my mind, my whatever, my tap tappedness into the collective, I'm going to lose access to parts of myself if I feel shame, if I'm hiding something, if I don't want people to know something. Um, so in order to access all of my intelligence and all of my abilities, I think it's really important to have a deep sense of self-acceptance that I'm not perfect. I have lots of things I still want to learn. I still fuck up and make mistakes. And you know what? I'm okay with all of that. I'm
Mhm.
okay with all of that. And I'm okay for you to know all of that. For me, that's a very powerful place to come from in leadership. And oh, Kirill. Hi, Kirill. I haven't seen you in years. Um, I like that guy a lot. He used to live in Boulder now. I think he lives in Seattle now. Do you live in Seattle, Kirill? Anyway, um, self-acceptance. It's kind of like I can't say that enough. And yes, it's like, well, then how do you self-accept? What is that? Well, there's a whole process there, but it it starts with seeing the value of it. It starts with seeing the value of it, that it really pays off big time to to identify any place where you're still judging yourself. You still think you're bad or wrong in any way. You still think you're not enough. You still think you're too much. All of these places are going to get exposed in a in a successful training experience, and we do our best to help you see all of those things, all of those little blind spots, all of those little rough patches, all of those places in yourself that you will avoid, and thereby not function at your best when you get near that territory. So your shame about being late precluded you from being able to look at it directly and creatively and enroll other people in helping you, or coming up with a new rule that says Sara gets to be late whenever she is. Like that's no longer an issue. And we, instead of trying to get you on time, can we emergently adapt to the reality that it's we're being crazy if we keep expecting you to be on time and you're not. Let's just face the reality that for now that's not going to change, and it's not a bad thing. We get a chance as a staff team to respond to that, and responding is one of the key. Maybe you want to go into the little map of authentic, responsive, transparent. You want to do that?
I do, but I want to say two things. First, one is just to chronicle what happened with the lateness throughout the weekend. Like as you know, these days of the training, kind of on the first day, it was like, how do we help Sara not be late? Like Kirill's saying, and I got slightly better, and but I still like showed up late. Um, and it's like even when I would plan to show up early and leave early, there'd be like some extenuating circumstance, like I'd forget something or have to pick somebody up. Because what my estimation of time is off in my head, like how long I expect something to take is actually very different than how long it takes, and I don't seem to be able to align that yet. So it was like, first day or two, like let's try to get Sara to be on time, and then by the third day, you all had like formed an agreement of basically like, here's what's going to happen in the meeting while you're not on time. Like here's what you're going to miss if you'll show up late, and that actually really helped me to like anchor something in my head. And I think we had a different strategy on the next. That actually helped me show up more on time. And then I think on the next day, like Hazel Grace texted me 15 minutes before and like kind of tracked my timing to tell me when to leave so that I could figure out. It was like this really cool, like, how do we make sure the thing happens that needs to happen? Um, and it's having me think that in some ways, the Emergent Leadership Training is an AAA meeting, awareness, acceptance, and action. So I think should be our new frame. and and that
I love
you can really influence any part of this process, like the awareness, like seeing and having others help you see the places in yourself that you aren't yet skilled in leadership or in yourself in life. Um, then acceptance, like where is it that you're in a shame spiral, where is it that you have trouble being with yourself? This is a big thing we end up working on with people, that just comes up in the kind of big group circle and in one-on-one at the ELT. And then the last one, action, like specifically, what do you do? And so there are formats that we use, like, you know, teaching rounds. So you get to teach something for 10 minutes and then you get rapid fire feedback for a couple minutes. And then the group changes and you teach another small group the same thing and you get feedback again and you teach again. And like, so action is also important of getting that sort of feedback. I want to
So
give the
another
other
answer
model,
to
but
the question.
I want to hear from you. Yeah.
So another response to the question, how do we teach leadership, is we teach it collaboratively. We teach it with lots of feedback from lots of different people, because I don't want to influence someone with my biases. I want to get multiple people giving feedback to each other. And then we train leaders through repetition, rapid prototyping and reprototyping and refining of content and style and delivery. So I like filling in more pieces of the question right in the question. How do we teach leadership? Another part of how we do it. Again, you were able to enroll us or think of creative ways to work with you around lateness when some of that shame came away, and some of that shame came away because of curiosity. So another way we teach leadership is we bring in abundant curiosity. Let's map out what's actually going on so that we begin to have more powerful ways of relating to it with more choice. I will also say that part of my acceptance of you being late is because you're not late because you know you slept in, or you're not late because you were watching TV. You're late because your life is full of kick-ass projects and people that you are supporting in massive ways, entire communities that you're supporting. So I'll just throw that in your defense. Anybody making up a story that you're irresponsible, it's because you've taken on so much in such a powerful way that has you in part being late. It's also that you are a type 7 on the Enneagram. I have to throw that in. And sevens are eternally optimistic about how much can be fit into time. They don't want to acknowledge limits. So you're also working with a type issue, and I have tons of space and compassion for that.
Thanks, Levin. It's like even hearing that, I feel seen and delighted. And it's even like with that, I'm less likely to show up late. Because when I'm fighting against my own shame and the fear of other people's judgment, that's when like my inner teenager comes out and is like, well, we're just not going to show up on time anyways. So there's just like so many layers to this. I love.
I like your teenager.
Aww. Don't need you to like my teenager. It's fine. I don't think my teenager would actually say that. I think she just really wanted to be loved all the time. Even back then.
So how are we doing on time? We're about a half hour in. Maybe you drop the mic drop the model here of where you were going before.
Yeah, let's do that, and then maybe we can take some questions from anyone on chat. So the model that underlies the authentic leadership training, which is the kind of the precursor to this training, kind of like a sister training, is the art of leadership, which is authentic, responsive, and transparent. And by authentic can mean so many different things. In this case, I'm basically using it to mean selfish, like authentic with my desires. Because if I'm leading and I'm leading from what I think you want, then I kind of get into this loop of confusion where like I think I'm leading for you and you think that I'm leading for me, and we're just in this like kind of, I'm trying to anticipate your responses. And that's how we lead a lot of the time, is like, you know, well, do you want to go to Chinese for dinner? Well, like I don't really want to, but like I think it's something that you want. And so we get into this cycle, right? And authentic leadership is like, let me just state my desires, whether or not I actually get them. Thanks, David. Whether or not I actually get them. So I'm just going to be honest with like, you know, right now I actually do want to move tables so I can plug in my phone, and I feel awkward about it. But I'm going to follow that. And, you know, like, yeah, I don't know what much more to say about that,
So
but if you can say
there's
something while I plug in my phone, I'd appreciate it.
That first part is me being connected to myself sufficiently so that I know what I want and what I don't want. And that I've done some work around accepting that what I want and what I don't want is okay. So in this arts model, the authentic step is knowing what I want and being okay with wanting something. And in that sense, there's that word selfish that you use,
Yes.
but selfish in a healthy way.
And even like in that moment where I was like, hey, I need to plug in my phone, I want you to talk. Like my model of leadership is that like what my internal script says is like, don't ever show that you don't have your shit together. Like, don't ask someone else to speak while you plug in your phone. Like, you should be able to just like walk around and keep a conversation going and bullshit. But it's like, what's the higher goal, really? And you know, if the higher goal for me is actually having a good Facebook Live, then it's almost like I'm being selfish with my own desires, but I'm also connected to some sort of higher goal. So that's like the real nuance there. And then, as I plug this in,
Alignment.
alignment, aligned, responsive, and transparent. Um, so the second, is there anything else you want to say on authentic before I go on? No more authenticity. Okay. I'm actually going to do transparent first because I think responsive is a good one to end on for this particular training. Transparent is like the other part of authenticity, which is like just revealing what's actually true. So there's this thing that happens oftentimes where like, you know, say I come into this call stressed about the technology, or when I was first getting on, I was like, I don't really know how to do this. I can just go into a script or start talking, and that's safe and it's more comfortable than talking when I don't know what's going on. But if people are watching it, they might notice that I'm slightly like uncomfortable or like seem anxious. And because we're empathetic beings, they might start feeling that in their bodies too. And so transparency allows me to align reality between what's happening in me and what's happening with other people. I heard circling, one of the practices that we do, described the other day as basically just this act of like getting on the same page about what is happening inside each of us. Like, because there's these internal worlds, we have to actually speak them out, bring them out in order to have congruence, and that therefore have other people feel like they know what's going on, and like, you know, there's a world that makes sense. And that requires the step of awareness of even knowing what's happening in me. And so we work on that as well. Anything you want to say on that?
The transparency part is pretty radical, I think. I'm doing it in the moment to a group. Again, we come back to that I've got to have enough self-acceptance that I'm okay with doing that without some massive fear of judgment from others, which is really my own judging myself. And then the importance of it, like you're saying, is it's a way to create cohesiveness. It's a way to create safety. It's a way to harness everybody's full intelligence by knowing that we're all on the same page. If I'm disoriented, if I'm threatened, if I don't feel safe, I'm going to be more in survival mode, and I'm not going to be able to learn as much. I'm not going to be able to contribute as much to the rest of the group. So this is another very, very important skill to develop, is transparency.
Mm-hmm. And the thing about
So
each of these, like
go
this
ahead,
model of,
please.
yeah, this off of what you're saying, like this model of authentic, responsive, and transparent leadership, like it only works if you combine all of them. Like if you're just transparent, just revealed, but it's not responsive to the group, it's not in service of anything in yourself and others, then it's actually like cannibalistic. It's like honesty in service of me feeling better by revealing things. And it can blow a group out. It's like why are you telling me that you're like sexually attracted to people in the room right now as the facilitator? Like, that's not, I don't, what? Now it feels unsafe. And then as a facilitator, if I'm not aware of and attuned to how the group is responding to what I said, if I miss that, then I actually lose the group's trust. And so that's kind of the last part of this, is responsive. Like, in any given moment, how do you notice the subtle cues that a group is giving off? Or ask them, because some of us are like aware and able to attune to subtle cues, and some of us like I have a really hard time telling what's actually happening in people. Like, I didn't learn social skills by intuition. I learned them by like a cognitive process, and I still like have to think about how everything works every time I'm in a social situation. I've only recently realized that not everybody does that. And so
I'm
responsiveness is
surprised to
actually
hear
like,
that, because I think
yeah.
I'm surprised to hear that. I think of you as one of the most social creatures that I know, and to hear that you have a process that you engage with is it's fascinating
Mm-hmm.
and impressive in a way, and also surprising.
Yeah.
So you really had to learn that responsiveness. You really had to practice the art of that.
There's different ways of being responsive based on how people's systems work. I think there's an emotionally attuned responsiveness, where I have some friends, especially ones who are dancers. I don't know if this is like chicken or egg, like if they became dancers and attuned this, or they were like this and then they became dancers. But I think some people's systems like are more intuitive, and like if something happens in a group, they feel it, but then they don't always know what to do with it. So sometimes what we train in the Emergent Leadership Training is, what do you do with that feeling? And then for other people, they might not even notice it. And so learning to ask a group things or notice the subtle cues, like that's another skill. That's like for those of us who are more in the cognitive process. So you can either hone the process that's not intuitive for you, or you can work on the skills that will let you use your process as a superpower. And I think that's what we go back and forth with in the course all the time, is like, how do you use where you're at to its best effect? And how do you hone the skills that you're not good at, that you want to have to complement the ones that already exist for you? But it comes from where
Yeah.
you're at,
And in your
because
framework,
that is what we're going to default to.
yeah. And in your framework of the ART, the authentic, the responsive, and the transparent, one of the things we can do is identify what are people already good at and what are their edges, and then really train in that part, and give and repeating and practicing and getting feedback, and the ELT. So there will be a link underneath, right? I want people to know that we're doing this because it's fun, and because it's edgy for us, maybe, and also because we really want to have people join us at the Emergent Leadership Training. So what would be the next step for them, or how do they get in contact?
There's a Facebook event. If they search Emergent Leadership Training Austin, I'll post it in the chat. They can also go to the website authrev.org, which I'm posting down here, and there's a link to trainings under that. That has the ELT on it. And also, if y'all want to message us any questions about this, I think it's something that Levin and I both love geeking out about. And as I've moved from being a facilitator to working with groups to training facilitators to work with groups, I've had to think a lot about, like, what is it that it actually takes, not just to lead, but to train people to lead, and not just to train them to lead in a specific situation, but to train them to lead in a way that's going to be effective, like cross-sectionally, because we're not always leading just in front of a group we're comfortable with, or just in front of a group of strangers that we're not comfortable with, or just in, a group of friends, or just in a corporate environment, or just in a party. Like, leadership has to transcend boundaries, and that means it has to start with the self, and how to set contexts that then you can play within as a self. So you can either set up your environment to be conducive to you, or set up yourself to be conducive to your environment. And so we kind of work on both of these in the Emergent Leadership Training.
I like that.
Yeah.
So
This
yeah,
was
if
fun.
there's any
Thank you for
questions
riffing.
right now, we're here. Yeah, if there's, I think you meant questions here, but also you meant like afterwards, just feel free to message us on Facebook with any questions for either one of us. Yeah.
Either one. Although if I get out, what's your sign, baby? I will not respond. I actually don't know what my sign is.
I would respond to that.
All right, you can message Levin with that.
So yeah, anything else here before we close out for now?
Oh, dates. The training is July 3rd to 7th, I believe. It's in Austin, Texas, and housing and food are provided if you're coming in from out of town. It's pretty central in the city. We'll send out the location once people register. And there'll be about 20 people maximum, including the leads. And let's see, we've got a question. I know what I want, and part of that is finding a solution, plan, or choice that works for everyone that I'm with. Yet the others that I am with are obviously not stating their needs or giving me anything to work with. Through an art lens, how do either or both of you navigate said situation? Ooh, that's a great question. Thanks, Travis. Do you want to take that one, Levin, or should I?
Sure. Well, we could both do it. I'll try to be brief. For one thing, I would be transparent in the sense of letting them know what I'm doing. You know, if I'm being transparent, I would say, you know, I want to find a solution that works for all of you, and I'm also going to go ahead and make the choice if I don't get input from you. And I'm not sure if you don't have input or if you're just not wanting to state it. But I'll give you another 30 seconds to have input, and then I'm going to make the choice for us. So I'm in touch with the fact that I have a choice. I'm in touch with the fact that I don't want to just run it. I want to include other people's desires, but in absence of their desires, I'm going to go ahead and do it. So that's the ART altogether for me.
Yeah. And the
And it
thing
has a
that I
lot
would
to
add
do with,
that's...
I mean,
Sorry, we've got a bit
go
of a
ahead.
lag. Please finish.
I was done. Go ahead.
Okay. My kind of magic trick for these situations that I've found is basically the transparency side of things. That when people are not answering something, it's kind of this this awareness, acceptance, action thing again. Like either they don't know what they want, they know what they want, but they're not comfortable saying it, or like they can't find a way of getting what they want, even if they knew it, so it's not worth saying. And for any of those cases, if you start by revealing what you want, like give them some things to bounce off of and keep giving them things until they start responding. Because if they don't know what they want, you speaking your desires will give them something to like polarize against. If they can't accept what they want, you being vulnerable and showing your acceptance of the things that like you want, including if you give like a couple different sorts of things, then that will help them accept it. And if they don't know how to act on it, you could add a little bit of like, you know, you can give things like, you know, if you're suggesting where to go out to dinner and no one's giving any ideas, you could be like, well, I know this really great Chinese place, but it's a little bit far away. There's an Indian place, and like I've been there a few times, but like I haven't like really liked the ambiance. So I'm curious, like, you know, do you have any ideas? Or to get more specific, like, are y'all looking for a place with good ambiance? Are you looking for a place with like good food? So you can help people define their categories, because when we have this wide open space, oftentimes we don't always know how to define our own needs or how to act on them.
Nice. I have another one coming up for Travis, which is that if the process itself of me wanting to hear from people and them not speaking up, if that becomes the loudest thing in the moment, emergently, I might drop the whole idea of trying to get the group to do the thing I originally wanted. And let's just have a conversation about this moment, what it's like for me to want your input and you not giving it. Screw the plan of what we were going to go do. Let's just focus on that, because that's the most bang for the buck going forward as a group, right? So there's a choice point there.
Mm-hmm.
How's
One of
this
the
going,
things we'll
Travis? Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, I'll say while he responds. One of the things that we'll also go over a bit in the ELT, and that I like talking about these days, is the idea of code switching. then any given group, there's a language that individuals and that the group is speaking. And if you come at them with kind of authentic relating speak of like, what are you feeling in your body and what are your desires? And, you know, here's my transparency. Like, they may not actually know how to respond to that. So there's a certain type of like being able to speak the language that someone else is using their words, using their mannerisms, um, coming from their
That's the
point of view. Like
responsive
maybe they're
part.
not
That was
exactly. Yeah. There's responding to like situations, there's responding to culture, there's responding to individuals, there's responding to yourself. And you can choose the kind of one of the goals of leadership for me is just to expand the range of options that I have in any given moment.
nice. Well, I know for me, I have to head off at this point. Do you want to close it out, Sarah?
And we're done. I guess I don't know more to say. I feel
I want,
I feel really
well, I
grateful to
want to
everyone who
appreciate you.
watched.
I want to
Okay.
appreciate you as my contribution to our closure. Thank you for initiating this and for um, being my friend and being my colleague and being on this ride together of um, emergently discovering as we go how to be the best team together and how to train other leaders the best that we can. And I love the ride that we're on. Thank you.
Yeah, me too. And I want to appreciate you for making this one of the most fun and enlivening trainings that I've ever done or been to. Like, I learned so much from teaching this with you and from just getting to see you speak on different things, um, and working with you and Jonathan and Hazel Grace, like to the point where I'm shifting a lot of what I'm doing with Authentic Revolution, my business, and the one program that I haven't discontinued or that I'm like still planning on teaching at least once a year, if not once every 6 months, is this one, because I'm like, I can't give it up. Like, it does too many powerful things. I enjoy it too much. I learn too much. So thank you for what you bring, and especially the frame of just incredible acceptance of things that I didn't know were possible to accept.
Thank you. I like all that. All right. Bye
Thanks,
for
everyone.
now. Thank you all for watching.
Bye. Hopefully we'll see you at the training.